Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. Let me make sure I get everything. Let's see. All right. This is Naaman from the DC camp back with another video. Call Hello Yahweh by Shem Yahushua by Shem Dash. Of course, double honors go out to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. All right. Salutations go out to the fellow Akim out there on the highways and byways, pushing the truth across four corners of this earth, trying to wake up the remaining hopeful elect. This is, again, Naaman with the DC camp. And yeah, what you're reading on the screen is true. How many times have we tried to let Jake know that, hey, these people hate us. You are way too comfortable around people that hate us. And if they had their way, all of these privileges, and let's be sure to call them what they actually are. They are privileges, not rights. All right, that they want to roll those back. All right, they are highly pissed. All right, of the things that we already have. They didn't want us to have that, and this video is going to go all into that. All right, we know what they did with the affirmative action. Hell, Roe v. Wade. That should have been a huge red flag there. All right. So once again, the things that Great Millstone and others that are affiliated with Great Millstone over the years, but specifically Great Millstone, the elder apostles on down, have tried to tell you people that this devil is going to come down. There's reasons why these scriptures are in the Bible. Jeremiah 30:7 talking about Jacob's trouble. Daniel 12:1 talking about there's going to be a time like no other. All right. And this is why we're trying to tell you, all right, you got to let this shit go. All right, we don't have any power here. But what I'm holding in my hand, this is what we're trying to tell you to come back to. You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans so-called, and all of you, of course, that are scattered abroad. If your spirit vibes with this, all right, Romans 8:16. Let's get that real quick. You know, in my opening, that's what I meant. That's what we're out here trying to do. Bring those Israelites, all right, back into the fold through what? The Word. All right, this is Romans 8:16. It says, the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit. What are we talking about? John 6:63, I'll get it. That we are the children of the Most High. Let's get that real quick. All right. In 63, it says, it is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. All right. This is what we're out here trying to do, because time, again, I can't stress it enough, time grows short. These devils about to make a move. They put it in your face here in America every day, how much they hate you. They give, miraculously so, I might add. We don't have anything to give to you Negroes, but we got all this money all of a sudden to give to people that never did a damn thing for America. A place called Ukraine, and if you haven't figured it out by now, that's all bullshit. That's just, you know, again, them folks, that's the same as giving it to Israel. Those are the same people, in case you hadn't figured it out. One of the most, if not the most crooked countries on the planet, Ukraine. All right. And now they're buying yachts and all those people that they sacrificed. I'm talking about um, you know, so they can get rich. Wow, wow. The stupidity of Americans, it's almost painful, especially Jake. Let's go ahead and roll this for time's sake. I will try to play as much as I can of the. It's like 1 hour and 5 minutes. You might as well say. So here we go.
There's a plot underway to reestablish Jim Crow. That is to keep blacks out of white society. White society includes your favorite restaurants, your favorite hotels, and much more. But what can we do to stop them from re-implementing Jim Crow? Stay with me, and I'll tell you. Hello, I'm attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers. Each week we bring you at least one legal analysis of some trending story having to do with politics, policy, personality, or pop culture to empower you with the information you need to defy an unjust legal system and to nullify systemic racism. If that interests you, and I hope it does, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell so you'll get notified every time we upload one of these informative videos. Now, once again, as I said in the opener, they are trying to reestablish Jim Crow. We must fight that. And I am not, again, trying to be an alarmist, a conspiracy theorist. I don't do that. I am a licensed attorney, and I'm in this space every day. And I feel it's my obligation and my duty to let you know what we're up against, what I'm actually seeing in the court system.
Exactly, because he's in a unique position in order to see these things. See, so much that our people take for granted. And you know what? You deserve what's coming because we've tried to warn you for so many years. All right? And you mock us, you both cuss and curse us. And you know what? Fine. No problem. See, these Edomites, these so-called white people, they long for the good old days. All right? He's going to get to explaining this. They long for the days where they had carte blanche. They could pretty much do with us, all right, whatever they wanted to do, all right, with impunity. They long for that time. But because of something called well, he's going to get to it. I don't want to jump the gun here.
Actually reading in court cases. This is my space, just like you have your space. This is my space, and I, again, feel obligated to inform my people, my folks, what they have up their sleeves. And see, they never really wanted us to be able to come to their establishments and be a part of their society in the first place.
Yep.
But they acquiesced. But here, 60 years later, after the Civil Rights Movement, they are having buyer's remorse. And so they're trying to reestablish Jim Crow. They're trying to, once again, re-exclude us from white society. And it's no big deal about being a part of white society. In other words, we don't get some special feeling being around white people. At least I don't. Maybe some people do. But that's not the issue. The issue is we should be able to go wherever we want to go, live wherever we want to live, eat wherever we want to eat so long as we can afford it. But
they don't want you or me, myself, around them. And I, for one, am like, well, what makes you think I want to be around you? Look at all the neighborhoods there. That's not good enough. Now they got to gentrify everything because, again, history tells us that when we tried to get away from them, we established at least 60 towns, settlements, whatever have you, and they were all destroyed. Wow. So, again, what are we to do? We have actually, like I said, no power whatsoever. They make it a point. It's like they follow us wherever we go. All right. But again, we tried to tell you Jakes out there that this was coming. Affirmative action, gone. Roe v. Wade, gone. That was a big lie to begin with. What case that started that? And who is it? At the forefront of all that? Jake. Can't wait to get an abortion. There's so much here, but you have to understand too. Integration was the worst thing that could have happened to us. That did. Okay. Wanting to be hand in hand with these devils. And they only did it because it profited them. But you have to understand too, during that time that let me rephrase that. The world saw them for what they truly were, the savages that they were and still are. Don't be fooled. And those of you that were fooled, you're in for a oh man. If your eyes weren't open, they will be soon. All right. This Neander thug, this caveman, he never changed. He's just a great actor. All right. Like he's saying here, they never, ever wanted this. They just settled for it. All right. And as a result of what the Bull Connors did back in those days with sicking dogs on us and the water hoses and all that, where the world saw them for the savages that they were. So what do we do? These damn niggers, if it wasn't for them. You know what? I know what we'll do. So now, come the 60s, after the 60s, you start seeing this influx of more so-called black entertainers. You got the blaxploitation and all this shit going on. You got after Johnson refused to run again, Nixon took over, and then of course you got people that pull their strings. So we're talking about at the highest levels, you have the elite bankers and their pawns underneath them, because these are the people that funded the slave trade in the first place, who knew who we really were. So all this is them constantly putting a foot on our neck because they have hopes of getting that birthright back, which is never going to happen. All right. So here comes the war on drugs, which was really the war on us. Then they started speaking code more. You can't say as that asshole that died around, what was it, 1991? He was like a, what was his name? Damn it. Of all things, he was into playing blues guitar. What was that asshole's name? He had a brain tumor. But he had, he was a confidant of Ronald Reagan and, top level. But Mossad took him out at an early age. He talked about that from the time of the Barry Goldwater and those that followed him, like Reagan. People of that ilk. You can't say, and I quote, nigger, that'll get you in trouble now. So, you have to use these coded words and phrases now. Busing, that's code for, well, we don't want them niggers around us. Things that I can't. Oh, now I got it. Let's look at this piece of shit. I brought him up before. Now I remember. Piece of shit. What was his first? Oh, I think I got it now. Here we go. Southern strategy. So you had to hear the asshole here. So this is the cat, Lee Atwater. All right, like I said, 91. He had a brain tumor, piece of shit. So he was 40. Brain cancer. All right, let's see. Political career. Let's go straight to the point. Southern strategy. As a member of the Reagan administration in '81, Atwater gave an anonymous interview to political scientist Alexander P. Lamas. Part of the interview was printed in Lamas's book, The Two-Party South, later reprinted in Southern Politics in the 90s with Atwater's name revealed. Bob Hebert reported on the interview in the October 6, 2005 issue of the New York Times, blah, 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 blah. James Carter IV, grandson of former President Jimmy Carter, had asked and been granted access to the tapes by Lamas's widow. Early in the interview, Atwater argued that Reagan did not need to make racial appeals, suggesting that Reagan's issues transcended the racial prism of the '68 Southern strategy. All right, let's see. Let's keep on down. Let's see. All right. Let's see. He goes in. That's the whole Southern strategy that Harry S. Dent Sr. and others put together in '68. Opposition to the Voting Rights Act, what we're talking about here, right, would have been a central part of keeping the South. Now you don't have to do that. All that you need to do to keep the South is for Reagan to run in place on the issues that he's campaigned on 664. And that's fiscal conservatism, balancing the budget, cut taxes, the whole cluster. Questioner, but the fact is, isn't it, that Reagan does get to the Wallace voter and to the racist side of the Wallace voter by doing away with legal services by cutting down on food stamps. Atwater, y'all don't quote me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. You're getting so abstract now that you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is that blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we are doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. And my point in bringing this up is the strategies never stopped. They just couldn't be as direct as they once were. All right. Back to the video.
So long as we can afford it. But our white counterparts, they see it completely different. They want to be able to say, no, we want to associate with whom we want to associate with. So if we want to serve only whites, we should be able to do that. That is what is percolating in white conservative, MAGA, right-wing circles. And I'm going to share with you, and you need to stay with me throughout this, because my videos can be a little bit long because I take my time to explain things to you. And I need you to stay with me until the very end, because I'm going to show you how we can combat this. I'm going to explain how they're doing it, and I'm going to show you what we can do to counter what they have planned. All right, so let's go to another screen, and we will get started here. By the way, I hope you have had a good weekend. Those of you who pulled for Kansas City, congratulations. That is a pretty big feat to have 3 Super Bowls in just a few years, 2 2 back-to-back and the opportunity to win 3 back-to-back. That is quite a feat. So congratulations. Okay, so they are reestablishing Jim Crow. That's literally what they're doing. Now, this man, his name is Christopher Caldwell. Christopher Caldwell, he is a leading conservative journalist and author. He wrote a book titled, and I hate to even give you the name to the book, please don't buy this book, The Age of Entitlement, America Since the 60s. It's a full frontal assault on the civil rights movement, especially the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, you may say, what is the Civil Rights Act of 1964? I heard some things about it. I'm going to explain it to you because it's extremely important law for you and me as African American people. Now, what follows are several alarming quotes from Caldwell's book. So I'm going to read you some quotes from his book, and you will see why we must stop what they have planned. We must counter their plot. So let's read some excerpts from Christopher Caldwell's book. Quote, in the mid-1960s, at a moment of deceptively permanent-looking prosperity, the country's most energetic and ideological leaders made a bid to reform the United States along lines more just and humane. They rallied to various loosely linked moral crusades, of which the Civil Rights Movement, culminating in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, provided the model. This is a book about the crisis out of which the 1960s order arose, the means by which it was maintained, and the contradictions at its heart that by the time of the presidential election of 2016, that was Donald Trump's election, had led a working majority of Americans, white Americans, to view it not as a gift, but as an oppression. Now, I was rather surprised that Caldwell admitted this. He admitted that most white Americans consider the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 particularly as oppression. Now, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we're going to get into it. But what it essentially does is protect certain rights that we African Americans have. And again, we're going to look at it specifically.
Privileges.
In their minds, for black people to have full equality is oppression to them. It's oppression to them because they're used to having carte blanche power, period. And when they must share that power with blacks especially, that to them feels like oppression. Again, I was surprised that he made that admission because we know that, but for a white conservative to admit it is quite extraordinary. Let's go back. He goes on to say regarding race, he says the reforms of the 60s, however, even the ones Americans loved best and came to draw part of their national identity from, came with costs that proved staggering high in money, freedom, rights, and social stability. These costs were spread most evenly among social classes and generations. Many Americans were left worse off by the changes. Now notice what he's doing. He is attacking the civil rights movement. And he's saying that white Americans now, as I said earlier, are having buyer's remorse because to implement the Civil Rights Act of 1964 has proved to be staggering high in money, freedom, rights, and social stability. In other words, to give black folks full equality or an attempt at full equality, they're saying it has cost us a lot of money, It has cost us some of our freedoms. It has cost white Americans some of our rights, and it has produced social stability. Now, what types of freedoms and rights are they talking about? Well, the right and the freedom to say, we don't want black folks in our businesses. We don't want black people in our communities. We don't want black people in our schools. To them, that feels like oppression, because they should be able to say, without the federal government telling them otherwise, that they just simply don't want to be around those people. That's what Christopher Caldwell is doing. And the only thing that stands between them saying to us as blacks that we don't want you in our establishments, you can't come in, we're not going to serve you, we're not.
Yeah, and you have to understand that in many ways we made it easy. Yes, it was them that, gave certain of us roles in Hollywood to portray us, in a less favorable light. The music industry, all that. Putting drugs in our neighborhood, all that played a part in making us something that no one wants to be around. How about that? How about that? All those years, we're talking about 60 years now. Like I said, after the Bull Connors and all them motherfuckers. All right? The world saw them do this to us. And now, what do they see? What do they think when they see us? Motherfuckers around here with the pants hanging off their ass. Hip-hop culture. All that was done on purpose. The neighborhoods is that spirit that comes with trash everywhere, dilapidated buildings, and it made gentrification so much easier. Yeah. Integration, right?
We're not going to let you in. You can't eat here. You can't sleep here. The only thing that stops them from doing that is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So they are attacking it, and they intend to get it overturned. They intend to gut it. And don't think that that is something impossible for them to do. No. You would be making a serious mistake if that's what you think. Here's why. They already gutted the Voting Rights Act, which also came out of the Civil Rights Movement. And they have literally gutted the Voting Rights Act. So if they can gut the Voting Rights Act, they can definitely gut the Civil Rights Act. So don't think that it can't be done. All right, let's go back. Mr. Caldwell says, economic inequality reached levels not seen since the age of the 19th century monopolist. The scope for action conferred on society's leaders allowed elite power to multiply steadily, and we now see dangerously sweeping aside not just obstacles, but also dissent. So they're saying, hey, again, the Civil Rights Act prevents us from expressing our dissent. It keeps us from doing what we want to do with our own property. And Big Brother federal government should not have laws in place that prevent us from doing whatever we want to do with our property, including excluding blacks if that's what we want to do. This is very serious, folks. At some point in the course of the decades, what had seemed in 1964 to be merely an ambitious reform revealed itself to have been something more. The changes of the 1960s, with civil rights at their core, were not just a major new element in the Constitution.
Now do you understand when we always say that this is not our rest? This was never meant, all right, to be somewhere where we chilled out and built up wealth. And no, because they're never going to let us do it. If it hasn't become obvious to you at this point that they're never going to let us rest, I don't know what else to tell you. It's like, wow, what else do you need to see? All right. Here it is, a people that have enjoyed, for the most part, that have ruled over us with impunity, minus the last 60 years or so. This year, 60 years, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. And they feel oppressed. Ooh, boy, these people just... Now you know why they are the wicked. Wow, it's like nothing's ever enough. This covetous man that the scriptures call, right on point. He can never have enough. The people that he's ruled with rigor, with a continual stroke, never let up. That's not enough. That's not enough. Wow.
They were a rival constitution with which the original one was frequently incomparable, and the incomparability would worsen as the civil rights regime was built out. I mean, wow. So he, writing for conservatives here, is saying to them, it feels like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, is like having a new constitution. That's how oppressive it feels to them. And I really want you to understand what he's saying and what this means. Whenever you have enjoyed absolute power for 400 years, to the point where you were able to enslave folks and treat them as your personal property, and then segregate them once that slave system was abolished. And now, all of a sudden, you got to start respecting these people's rights. Yes, that makes a lot of white people feel like they're being oppressed. And what Mr. Caldwell is suggesting is that is the reason why we elected Donald Trump. Because he came in office promising us that we would take back our country and make it great again. MAGA, make it great again. By the way, MAGA equals pre-civil rights. In some people's minds, MAGA means going back to the enslavement of African American people. I mean, what else can it mean? Because if you look back at any period of American history, it was pretty bleak for black folks. Certainly wasn't great for us, being enslaved, being segregated, being lynched, etc. So what else do they mean when they say make America great again? Well, it must be pointing back to those awful periods of American history that we African Americans know were not great. And because they cannot implement those types of policies just outright anymore because of the Civil Rights Act, again, they feel oppressed. They feel like it's another constitution.
Wow.
I mean, this book is very eye-opening, and this is why I'm reading parts of it to you. I don't want you to go buy it. Don't go buy this book. Don't give this man any money. I bought the book, but I bought it because I needed to share with you what is in this book, what they're thinking. Okay? Mr. Caldwell says, let me get a drink of water here. Mr. Caldwell says, much of what we have called polarization or incivility in recent years is something more grave. It is the disagreement over which of the two constitutions shall prevail. So here's what he's saying. He's saying since Trump has taken office and white people have begun to really boldly, blatantly express their grievances, their unhappiness and dissatisfaction with things, it is because they feel, again, that there is a new constitution in this country, one that sort of overrules, for example, the First Amendment, the freedom to associate with whom you want to associate with, because of the Civil Rights Act. So they're literally saying the Civil Rights Act is oppressing our constitutional rights to say no. We don't want black folks in our establishment. We should be able to do that because the First Amendment says that we can associate with whom we want to associate with. And if we don't want blacks in our businesses, if we don't want blacks at our restaurants, if we don't want blacks in our pools, what have you, hotels, we should be able to do that. So, it is the disagreement over which of the two constitutions shall prevail. The de jure Constitution of 1788, which is the Constitution that we actually have, with all the traditional forms of jurisprudential legitimacy and centuries of American culture behind it, or the de facto Constitution of 1964, the de facto meaning one that's not really legally in place, but it's sort of recognized as the Constitution. And of course, when it says de facto Constitution of 1964, it is literally talking about the Civil Rights Act. So again, in their mind, that's a whole new constitution that's oppressing them, which lacks this traditional kind of legitimacy, but commands the near unanimous endorsement of judicial elites and civic educators and the passionate allegiance of those who received it as a liberation. I mean, this is a full frontal assault on the civil rights movement generally and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 in particular. They despise it, they hate it, and they're going to do everything they can to overturn it. And what that means for us is we could walk up to, say, Chili's or Cheesecake Factory or your favorite hotel, and there's now a sign that says, no blacks allowed. And you may be sitting there thinking, oh, come on, man, nobody's going to do that. What are you talking about? No one is going to do that. That's not going to happen. You're just making this stuff up. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'm not making anything up. I'm telling you what, you're reading it. I'm showing it. I'm giving you receipts. And as I said, the proof is in the pudding. They've already gutted the Voting Rights Act. They have gutted Section 4, Section 5, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which now permits states to implement all of these voter restriction laws and all of this racial gerrymandering that we're seeing. So don't tell me I'm making anything up. These people hate the civil rights movement from the beginning. They hated the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They hated the Voting Rights Act. They hated all that came out of the civil rights movement. And they, with the inspiration of Donald Trump, are now gutting everything they can. That's the war that we're in. And I'm not making this up. The increasing necessity that citizens choose between these two orders and the poisonous conflict into which it ultimately drove the country is what this book describes. So he's saying on one hand, you got the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which requires that they treat blacks with some dignity, versus the way they interpret the Constitution is butting heads. And it all came to a boil. It all not only rose to the surface, but spilled out into the streets, resulting in basically a storming of the Capitol building. And groups like the Nazis and the KKK and all of those groups marching in the streets. So they're saying, basically, as Donald Trump said to them, we're taking our country back. We don't care what the Civil Rights Act is. We don't care what the Voting Rights Act is. This is our country. This is a white man's country, and we're taking it back. That's what Trump represents. That's why they love him. I don't care if he had 1,000 criminal charges. Literally. It doesn't matter, because in their eyes, he is the man who's helping them make America great again. Get back to where white people have absolute power. And in order to do that, again, what must they do? Gut everything that came out of the civil rights movement, including, by the way, including the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. He talks about that in this book. So they're beginning to attack Dr. King because Dr. King inspired the enactment of the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Fair Housing Act. Dr. King and the movement that he led resulted in all of that. So in their minds, they now got to go after the figurehead, who's Dr. King, and the fruits of his work. What are they? You're going to hear it over and over. The 1964 Civil Rights Act, which is the only reason why you and I are able to go to restaurants that are white-owned, hotels, and other public accommodation. Not making this up. This is what we're dealing with. Today, slavery is at the center of Americans' official history, which race the central concept in the country's official self-understanding. Never before the 1960s was this the case. Wow. So he's saying before the 60s, before all of this protesting and all of this civil rights talk, before then, slavery wasn't a big deal. Race wasn't a big deal. This is revisionist history. Slavery has always been the issue of this country. This country, as you've heard me say in previous videos, started out with a birth defect. In the DNA of America was the enslavement of African American people. Slavery has always been the big issue of America, as well as race.
Israelites.
So you see why Nikki Haley will not admit, without some coercion, that the Civil War was fought over slavery, because she thinks like this man. We are making the big issue out of slavery and race. In other words,
by the way,
shut up and dribble. Right? That was Laura Ingraham. That's what she said to, I think it was LeBron James.
An immigrant, by the way, who had to change her name, but this was not a racist country. All right, let's get this. All right. This skank here. All right. Born Nimarata Nikki Randhawa. Ah. 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 Get a load of that. Remember what I said about these immigrants taking taking on white supremacist
She said to,
attitudes?
I think it was LeBron James, shut up and dribble. Stop talking about all this stuff. Stop talking about equal rights and civil rights and just play basketball.
The fuck is civil
And
rights?
so that's what he's saying that we blacks ought to do. Shut up and just deal with the fact that this is a white man's country and we're taking it back. Never before the 60s, 1960s, was this the case. For almost all of American history, racial conflict was understood as a set of episodes, some shameful, some glorious, set against a larger story about building a constitutional republic. Bull.
Yep. Bullshit.
That is crazy. Racial conflict was understood as a set of episodes. No, this country has always been in racial conflict.
Yep.
Whenever you enslave somebody for 246 years on the basis of their race, on the basis of their color, there is racial conflict. And it's not an episode. It's not a set of episodes. It is the American life. It is, again, in the DNA. It's in the air of America. So he's suggesting that we blacks just had our episodes of rebellion and episodes of fighting back and episodes of demanding civil rights. Apart from that, America was at peace and our slaves were happy and blacks were happy being segregated and blacks were happy just being our servant.
In other words, what we went through, who cares? It was nothing. Why don't we take that attitude with something that really didn't happen, with the so-called Holocaust, the Holocaust? Why don't we take that attitude? Yeah, how about that? People who stole our identity, by the way. All right.
And essentially making money for us. Do you not know that we basically enriched white America from the 1600s to like the 1960s?
Still doing it.
Most of our work, all of our work during slavery, but even during Jim Crow, our work and productivity went to the enrichment and building wealth for white people. And that sort of came to a stop, or it was greatly reduced in the 60s.
Speaking of Dr. Claude Anderson, this is a book I read back in the day. Black labor, white wealth. See how much it is now, hardcover? $123. I was reading this on the bus. All right. On the 7, as a matter of fact, here in the District of Columbia. And I'm sitting near the back, actually more in the middle. I was on one of these extra long buses that, bend in the middle. And this Edomite woman came on, and I'm reading the book, not paying attention really to what's going on, but my peripheral vision just happened to catch her looking at me, and I'm reading the book here, this book, and she turned around and hauled ass. This actually happened. Black labor, white wealth. She read that title, she hauled ass.
was greatly reduced in the 60s. And that's what he's saying. And there are a bunch of them. You see it. That's why they're so passionately supporting Donald Trump. Now, I can't say that without thinking about why would black people support this?
Exactly.
But they are. I don't understand it, but they are. Anyway,
aside from them being fools and idiots, they bought so heavily into America. It validates what we've said all along about so many of our people can't see past America. All right, these are those spirits that were back in Egypt, couldn't get over Egypt. All right, that were going at Moses. What do? You led us out here where we were. We let's get it. You know, you led us out here just to die, Moses. Man, niggas. In any time period, the people complain. I'll start at the top. And when the people complained, it displeased the Most High Yahweh. And the Most High heard it, and his anger was kindled. And the fire of the Lord burnt among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses. And when Moses prayed unto the Most High, the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Most High burnt among them. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers, and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. And the manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof as the color of bdellium. And the people went about and gathered it and ground it in mills, or beat it in a mortar and baked it in pans and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was as the taste of fresh oil. All right. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Most High was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. And Moses said unto the Most High Yahweh, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? And wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them, that thou shouldest say unto me, Carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth a sucking child, unto the land which thou swarest unto their fathers? All right, whence should I have flesh to give unto all this people? For they weep unto me, saying, Give us flesh, that we may eat. I am not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. All right, so yeah, it was too much of take all this on his own. So that's when he got help. But all this complaining and those same spirits back, they want or they seek this devil's love so badly. All right, and that they refuse to see what's right in their face. And that is, they're going to roll all this back, and they're trying like hell. All right, what do you think, like he was saying, what do you think Make America Great Again is about? When was America great? When was America great? Especially for us. But for them, it's when we were in slavery, at the very least, Jim Crow, like I said, where they could treat us like shit all they wanted. All right. Remember, they long for the good old days. Those were the good old days.
But they are. I don't understand it, but they are.
Yep.
Anyway, I'll talk about that later. After the 1960s, the constitutional republic was sometimes discussed as if it were a mere set of tools for resolving larger conflicts about race and human rights. Well, yes.
Human rights, not civil.
What do you think? We're just going to sit quiet and go along with our subjugation? No, thank you. So yes, we're going to continue to push.
It's like Dr. Claude Anderson said, who the fuck is civil? But you notice something when it comes to these Skittles nations people, they want to call that human rights. Again, the hatred toward us, the lengths to which they've gone to break up our families, to constantly play the woman against the man, which I must admit, that didn't take very much effort on their part. It's like someone said to me in the late 70s that we are a pitiful people. All right. But there's a reason for that. These curses, again, these things would stand out. These curses would be on us, all right, as a mark. It tells you that. Deuteronomy 28:46. All right.
The envelope. In the 1950s, highways, televisions, and corporate expansion made it hard to hide any part of the country from any other part. Systems of racial separation, known collectively as Jim Crow, lost much of their logic, and with it, their power to enforce, intimidate, and control. Not true. Not true. Jim Crow segregation was fought for, and whites, especially Southern whites, and a great number of Northern whites and whites throughout the country wanted Jim Crow to continue.
Yep.
What's the old saying? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Frederick Douglass said, power seeds nothing without a struggle. We struggled to dismantle Jim Crow. People died. Cheney, Swerner, Goodman, Emmett Till, Medgar Evers,
Philadelphia, Mississippi,
Dr. King. People died to dismantle Jim Crow. That was not the result. Jim Crow didn't go away because it lost its logic in the minds of white people and its power to enforce. No, that sounds like whites had a change of heart and said, you know what? I think it's time that we start being better people toward the Negroes. No, we forced the dismantling of Jim Crow. We had to fight for it in the courts and in the streets. Again, oftentimes having to sacrifice our lives. Now, here's the boogeyman right here. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, passed by Lyndon Johnson in the immediate aftermath of John F. Kennedy's death, was meant to deliver the coup de grace to Jim Crow and to end the black marches and police crackdowns in Mississippi and Alabama that television viewers were seeing almost weekly. The act banned racial discrimination in voting booths, Title I, hotels.
Sorry about that.
Voting booths, Title I, hotels, restaurants, and theaters. Title II, public facilities, from libraries to swimming pools to bathrooms. Title III, and public schools. Title IV. You see, he's laying out what he finds problematic with the Civil Rights Act. He's essentially saying, and I'm going to go over it more, so let me just wait. I'm going to go over that a little more. But that was not all it did. In other words, it didn't stop us from just allowing blacks in our restaurants, our hotels, and pools. It also empowered the federal government to reform and abolish certain institutions that stood in the way of racial equality and to establish new ones. by expanding the Federal Civil Rights Commission, Title V, by subjecting to bureaucratic scrutiny any company or institution that received government money, Title VI, by laying out hiring practices for all companies with more than 15 employees. So he's literally lamenting the ways the Civil Rights Act affected white power. I mean, he's complaining about it. I mean, he's like, he's essentially saying that, the Civil Rights Act also forced us to, treat blacks with a certain level of dignity. Otherwise, we couldn't get federal money. It forced us to hire blacks. It forced us to practice equality in our hiring if we had more than 15 employees, and we're just tired of it. We're tired of having to treat blacks with a level of dignity and equality. I'm wanting you to understand, in layman's terms, what we're up against. So that's why I'm paraphrasing what he's writing here. I'm going in between the lines so you can understand it. By creating a new presidential agency, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. Some of you have dealt with EEOC workplace discrimination. I mean, what would you do without the EEOC? Well, he's sitting here complaining about it. For us, sometimes it's the only thing we have when we know we've been mistreated because of our race by our employer or potential employer. But for him, the EEOC is oppression. By doing all these things to act emboldened and incentivize bureaucrats, lawyers, intellectuals, and political agitators to become the eyes and ears.
Just thought of something. That's why now in Florida, oh boy, they're trying to pass legislation. Let me see how it's worded. Hope I got it right. Yeah, this is it. Florida bill would make it defamation to accuse someone of racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. A bill introduced in the Florida Senate would make it defamation to accuse someone of what I just read, which could total the freedom of speech in the Sunshine State. SB 1780, defamation, false light, and unauthorized publication of name or likeness, which was introduced on Friday, will make it easier for an individual to sue another person for defamation. According to the measure, an allegation that the plaintiff has discriminated against another person or group because of their race, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity constitutes defamation per se. So even when these allegations are false, they are automatically under SB 1780, anyone in these circumstances wouldn't have to prove actual malice, which was a standard set for defamation suits following the decision in the 1964 U.S. Supreme Court case, New York Times versus Sullivan. Additionally, the bill would make it easier to set up the conditions for a fact finder to automatically infer that actual malice took place after an accusation of discrimination is made. In cases regarding accusations of homophobia or transphobia, defendants charged with defamation are not allowed to use the plaintiff's religious or scientific beliefs as part of their defense. And if they're found liable for defamation, the defendant could be fined at least $35,000. Like its Florida House counterpart, HB 757, the bill would significantly narrow the definition of a public figure in defamation suits by excluding non-elected or appointed public employees and individuals who gain notoriety by publicly defending themselves against accusations, giving interviews, or being the subject of a viral video, image, or statement uploaded on the internet. The bill also applies to statements made in print, television, and social media. See, they were getting their asses torn up because everybody's got a cell phone now. Everybody has a camera and video recorder on those said phones. So they introduced shit. See, this weasel ass so-called fucking white man, that's what he is. He's a coward. All right. Let me read the last paragraph. Lastly, the bill also removes certain privileges provided to journalism and media entities, specifically the right to keep sources anonymous. According to the bill, statements made by anonymous sources would be considered presumptively false and make journalists vulnerable to these lawsuits. Man, told you. We tried to tell you. Like he's saying here, these pieces of shit, they've been keeping score. All right? All the ways that they've lost that power that they used to enjoy. The good old days. They want it back. That's the reason he's telling you. He told you that was the motivation for putting Trump in office. And they started to show their asses there. That's why they couldn't believe Joe Biden won. No. Motherfucker's head exploding and shit. Continuing on for at least a little bit more, and then I'll just put the link here because I'm going well over an hour here. Oh, yeah.
And political agitators to become the eyes and ears and even the foot soldiers of civil rights enforcement. So the bureaucrats, the folks in the government, the lawyers, the intellectuals, in other words, those of us who are fighting them, he says we're the eyes and ears or the foot soldiers of this civil rights enforcement. And by golly, we're tired of it. We're tired of getting sued. We're tired of being forced to treat blacks, again, equally with some level of dignity. We're tired of it. We are rebelling and...
What I just read you, that's what they're trying to get passed in Florida. Look for that to catch on in other states. All right.
Voting against this new Constitution, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. We want to go back to the old Constitution where we can decide if we really want to be a part of this civil rights era. Just stay with me. Over time, more of the country's institutions were brought under the Act's scrutiny. Eventually, all of them were. The grounds for finding someone or something guilty of discrimination expanded. New civil rights acts, notably the Voting Rights Act of 1964, which they gutted, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968, when Trump was in office, Ben Carson was over HUD, and they completely turned on its head the intent of the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Brought new rights for black citizens and new bureaucracies to enforce them. What's wrong with blacks getting new rights or equal rights, equity, fairness? What's so bad about that? Civil rights transformed the country not just constitutionally, but also culturally and demographically. It changed the country culturally and demographically. What are they saying? Well, because of the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act, there are a whole lot more non-white people in America. And because there are so many more non-white people in America in positions of power, it has changed the culture of the country. It is no longer a white-dominated culture anymore. And for them, that feels like oppression. That feels like oppression to them. And what does that tell you that's in their minds? That tells you that they feel like this is their country. It's not, what's those songs? This land is your land, this land is my land, from California. No, that's not the way they see this. They see this as it being a white man's country. And now it has changed demographically, it has changed culturally, and they are radicalized, angry, fired up, and as Trump has told them, take back your country. Does all this make sense? I'm trying to point this out to you to show you that we're really, African Americans, we're really in a crisis. We're really in a crisis.
Again, you wouldn't believe us. You would not believe us. And even, I keep bringing this guy up, but even Dr. Claude Anderson back in the 90s said this, all right? Not knowing the scriptures, but he said we're in danger of becoming third or fourth class citizens. What do you think's happening now? See, Jake be playing games. We're trying to tell you that this snake that rules over you, all right, has plans. All right? He has big plans, and they're not good.
And many of us don't even realize it. Well, that's why I'm on YouTube. I'm on YouTube to sound the alarm. Costing trillions upon trillions of dollars and spanning half a century, it rivals, in terms of energy invested, the peopling of the West, the building of transcontinental railways and highways, the maintenance of a Pax Americana for half a century after World War II, or for that matter, any of the wars that the country has fought, foreign or civil. Diversity. So here's some of the things he said about diversity. Just stay with me. I know we're reading a lot here, but we got to. Diversity, the governing principle, as distinct from the abstract noun, was introduced by the U.S. Supreme Court almost accidentally in 1978. It was a moment of mortal peril for affirmative action, the main avenue through which civil rights law was changing the country's public and private institutions. So diversity, in other words, came about in a case we commonly call Bakke. Bakke was a man who applied for admissions in a California university. He was denied admissions, and the U.S. Supreme Court essentially said that diversity was a compelling reason to increase the admission of African American people, because campuses should be diverse. And the court says, okay, that is a compelling reason to overcome our scrutiny anytime a state takes race into account. All right, I could go deeper into that. I'm just trying to say all this in layman's terms. Affirmative action was unpopular. Well, with whites, right? With white conservatives especially. As most Americans saw it, most white Americans, let's be honest, it was unfair. But until Bakke, it had at least been morally intelligible to a broad public. It sought to atone and compensate for slavery and Jim Crow. Now, I gotta take major issue with that. Affirmative action was not implemented to atone for slavery and Jim Crow. You know what will atone for slavery and Jim Crow? Reparations. Not affirmative action.
But what kind of reparations? Because if you're expecting a piece of shit like this to give you any kind of relief or recompense, or no, he's not. This is the only kind of reparation that we're interested in. True reparations. Because anything that you get from this piece of shit, you gotta understand, he's still in rulership. He's still in his kingdom. Alright? So he's content with not really, let me rephrase that. He sets the rules and standards as to what is just. Alright? See, he looks at it like, I've already given them enough, I've given them welfare. And as long as you got a motherfucker like that that's over you, you're never going to attain any kind of justice. This is Revelation, true justice, that is. Revelation 13:10. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. That's true reparations. That's balancing the scales. All right. Now, I made the comment about you trying to, you expect someone like this, what I'm fixing to read, to give you any kind of, man. Psalm 43:1. Judge me, O Most High, and plead my cause against an ungodly nation. These people are the wicked. Read Malachi, 1st chapter, verses 1 through 4. The nation of Edom, they are the wicked. All right. Oh, deliver me from the deceitful, deceitful and unjust man. He's unjust, deceitful. Strong's H4820. Sense of deceiving, fraud, craft, deceit, treachery. This is how he's used to dealing with us. So you're going to expect someone with this not only reputation, but is proven to be such. All right. And you're still expecting him to do right by you? I'm looking at you now as the problem.
Not affirmative action, which only required that blacks be given a fair chance to become students at major, predominantly white universities. That's not atoning for something that happened in the past. That is saying today and going forward, you must treat these people right. That's not atoning for slavery and Jim Crow.
See what I mean?
To start doing the right thing is not atonement.
But that's what he considers.
Atonement is when you give something for past injuries.
Which he's never going to do.
Not because you are now demanded and required to start doing the right thing. I hope you understand that. That's offensive. And how dare he say that, quite frankly. No lesser task would have justified giving the government such powerful, arbitrary, and constitutionally dubious tools. Bakke altered that rationale. Racial preference was meant to remedy not past, but present discrimination. If there was no evidence of such discrimination, it could only be because the whites who held power were hiding it. They were practicing racism deviously, underhandedly, or, at the very least, unwittingly. This was not the glorious role white Americans had envisioned for themselves when they came bearing what they saw as the gift of civil rights in 1964.
Get the fuck
What is wrong with this man? The civil rights movement did not successfully bring about these laws because of, as he says, the glorious role white Americans had envisioned for themselves, and they came bearing what they saw as the gift of civil rights. Civil rights, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act, Whites did not give us that as a gift. We fought for that. We died for that. Our blood was shed for that. We had to make them do that. We had to make them. They didn't give civil rights laws to us as a gift because of their benevolence. This is a twisted, white conservative worldview. White people fought us. They released their dogs on us. They turned their water hoses on us when we demanded civil rights. They hit us upside the head with bricks. The federal government had to activate the National Guard to get blacks in some of these schools. What is he talking about? Again, this is revisionism. This is revisionist history. And we can't allow them to do that. And to look at the evidence from the Bakke opinion, the case that they were systematically denying opportunities to black people seemed weak. A white man rejected with scores in the 97th percentile, while minorities got admitted with scores in the 18th. Now, let me tell you something. That is total garbage.
Yeah, I'm like...
One of the requirements of the Bakke opinion and the subsequent affirmative action cases was that blacks who were admitted under some affirmative action program had to be qualified.
Yeah.
They had to be top-ranking students.
Yeah.
They could not be...
For you Moabites, you pieces of shit that were... How am I going to put this? You aided our enemy. One of these people like we're reading here, I forget the guy's name. He's also a conservative pundit, whatever. But his specialty is going around. He was behind the these Moabites bringing the lawsuit that led to them doing away with affirmative action. I can't remember that asshole's name. But now you're looking like all sad and shit now because I guess you figured that, ooh, they used us. Well, you set yourself up for that. You know? And as another way of totally disrespecting us, they give them a hate crime bill before they gave us. I mean, it's like, don't you get it yet? These people hate us. They hate us. We are a constant reminder of their greatest fuck up. And they can't deport us like all these other people. All right? So what's the only other alternatives? Just outright kill us, you know, with their race soldiers, the police, pharmaceuticals, CDC, all these things play a part. All right, but the joke's on them because now they're at a point where they can't reproduce. The Most High is checkmating these pieces of shit, and it's beautiful to see.
Low-performing students and get in under affirmative action. That is written in those court cases. I've read those cases. I'm a civil rights lawyer. I'm telling you, that is a lie. That blacks were admitted into schools when they were not qualified to be there in the first place.
And that was the argument that these simple-as Moabites, all right, they fell into that trap, making that same argument. Well, they got into these schools and they were unqualified, but we've got our people that make, what's the fucking SAT, what's the perfect score? Is it 1,400? Or some shit, you know, and they still can't get in. Well, maybe there's something else going on here. But they like to use us, you know, as an example there, wrongfully, I might add, like he's stating here. No, when we got those scholarships or we got into these schools, we had to be qualified in order for that to happen. It wasn't just handed to you.
Saying, I tell you, that's in their minds. That tells you that they feel like this is their country. It's not, what's those things trying to implement it to atone for slavery and Jim Crow.
Sorry.
You know what will atone for slavery and Jim Crow? Reparations. Not affirmative action, which only required that blacks be given a fair chance to become students at major, predominantly white universities. That's not atoning for something that happened in the past. That is saying today and going forward, you must treat these people right. That's not atoning for slavery and Jim Crow. To start doing the right thing is not atonement. Atonement is when you give something for past injuries, not because you are now demanded and required to start doing the right thing. I hope you understand that. That's offensive. And how dare he say that, quite frankly. No lesser task would have justified give a task of 11th percentile while minorities got admitted with scores in the 18th. Now let me tell you something. That is total garbage. One of the requirements of the Bakke opinion and the subsequent affirmative action cases was that blacks who were admitted under some affirmative action program had to be qualified. They had to be top-ranking students. They could not be low-performing students and get in under affirmative action. That is written in those court cases. I've read those cases. I'm a civil rights lawyer. I'm telling you, that is a lie. That blacks were admitted into schools when they were not qualified to be there in the first place. Total garbage. That's a lie. All right. So that's all the book. But I believe that you now see what is being said in white conservative circles and what they plan to do, the plot that they're developing to get rid of that 1964 Civil Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act is gutted. Now it's about gutting the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And you're going to hear more about it. But we can save and protect the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I'm going to show you how. So let's go back to the Reconstruction Amendments. African Americans should know all three of these amendments. The 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment were added to the Constitution specifically for African American people.
Yep.
All right. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery except as punishment for crime. And that's important to know, that slavery is abolished for the most part in this country. A person can be enslaved and rights taken from them for punishment of crime. I've told clients in the past that by committing crime, essentially you are allowing them to re-enslave you under the 13th Amendment. But for the most part, it abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment, it gives blacks birthright citizenship. In other words, if you're born here, you are a citizen. And that was really important in light of the Dred Scott decision, which said basically that blacks, if they're descendants of Africans, if they have one drop of black blood, they cannot be a citizen of the United States of America. And therefore, whites are not obligated to respect any rights of a black person. Well, the 14th Amendment gave blacks birthright citizenship, and the GOP is trying to alter that. They're trying to alter the 14th Amendment. It also gives African Americans due process and equal protection, and it stops or prohibits states from discriminating against blacks on the basis of race. Very important stuff. And then the 15th Amendment states basically that states cannot abridge a person's right to vote. These were the amendments that the abolitionists fought in Congress. At that time, they were actually Republicans. Well, this is a very, very, very different Republican Party now. Very different. Because this Republican Party is trying to use these very amendments against blacks. But in any event, they thought it necessary to add these three amendments to the Constitution to protect the rights of those newly freed African enslaved people. 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. But the problem is they didn't have any real teeth that could be enforced. There was no way to enforce these amendments. So each of these amendments gave Congress the authority to pass laws to enforce the provisions of these amendments. The 14th Amendment was what was used to enact all types of laws, civil rights laws. But the 14th Amendment only applied to states. So in order to get the Civil Rights Act passed, which was targeted toward private white establishments, Congress had to enact the Civil Rights Act of 1964 pursuant to interstate commerce. Basically saying if white-owned establishments, restaurants, hotels, etc., are using interstate commerce, the trucking industry, etc., then they should not be able to use interstate commerce to discriminate against people. So Congress says we have authority under the Interstate Commerce Clause to regulate white-owned establishments. And so that's how the Civil Rights Act of 1964 came about. The Voting Rights Act came about pursuant to or to enforce the 15th Amendment. Okay? All right, let's go back. So victories of the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits racial discrimination by certain private entities. The Voting Rights Act, it has been gutted by SCOTUS. The Fair Housing Act protect blacks against being discriminated against in the area of housing. Now, specific provisions of the Civil Rights Act. Title I, it bars unequal application of state voter registration requirements for federal elections. That's real important, right? Title II, prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin in certain places of public accommodation, for example, hotels, restaurants, and places of entertainment. I want to drive this point home because a lot of what I'm saying may sound like legal jargon, but the only reason, folks, that we can patronize our favorite restaurants, and most of them, let's be real, are owned by whites. The only reason we're able to patronize our favorite restaurants, hotels, etc., is because of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That's the only reason why whites cannot put a whites-only sign and keep black folks out of their business. That's the only reason. There is no other reason. There is no other reason that racist white people could not say, okay, now that the Civil Rights Act is gone, I am not allowing any blacks in my establishment. I'm tired of them coming in here starting trouble, upsetting the good white people and the good whatever other people. I'm tired of it. So It's just too much issues, too many problems. So we're no longer allowing blacks to enter our establishments. The only reason they can't do that right now without getting sued is because of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. It's just that simple. We are really in a very vulnerable situation.
Yep.
And that's the reason why I created this YouTube channel, so that you can understand the...
We are prey here in America. Always, P-R-E-Y. All right. We always have been. All right. And as long as we're here, we always will be. Because we are under those curses. All right.
Oh, and understand the precarious situation that we're in. We're facing an existential threat of white supremacy. I just read you multiple quotes from a book that is widely read, consumed, and has become the inspiration and strategy for white conservatives to, again, gut the Civil Rights Act. Title III permits the U.S. Justice Department to sue to secure desegregation of certain public facilities owned, operated, or managed by any state or subdivision of a state. Title IV allows the U.S. Attorney General to sue schools over segregation and provide funds to school boards to desegregate. Title V expands the role and duties of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. Title VI prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin by recipients of federal funds. That is real important, because schools that receive federal dollars, universities and other schools, if they want those federal dollars, they cannot discriminate against us or any other race if they want those federal dollars. This is how powerful the Civil Rights Act of '64 is, and it's the reason why they hate it. Title VII prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin by certain businesses, and created the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So businesses that have over 25 employees must abide by the Civil Rights Act. Cannot discriminate on the basis of race, color, etc. That's the only reason why those businesses cannot say, we don't hire blacks here. You may be thinking, you're making this up. I'm not making this up. I'm warning you of the precarious situation that we're in. Another Trump administration, that's all they're waiting for. I did a video entitled Project 2025. Go watch it. Because they have put in place certain resources and people that if Trump wins, they will immediately begin to implement an agenda to turn back the hands of time where civil rights are concerned. And this is not even secretive. I mean, they're saying these things out loud. It just seems like we're not listening. So I'm here to wake you up. That's what I'm here to do, to wake you up. Who's attacking the Civil Rights Act? These people are some of the ones. Yes, Larry Elder, Charlie Kirk, Jason Whitlock, Christopher Caldwell. God, I forgot this other guy's name. It'll come to me in a moment. Jesse Lee Peterson. What a joke. But not really a joke, because he is out there helping them implement this agenda. And of course, Clarence Thomas, who is on the highest court in the land, helping them implement this agenda. And of course, there are 6 very conservative justices on the Supreme Court who will gut the Civil Rights Act if a case comes in front of them, no doubt. So they're waiting for the right case to cross their desk. And Sam Alito, Clarence Thomas, John Roberts, Amy Barrett, who else? Who am I missing? Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, they will gut the Civil Rights Act. As a matter of fact, these people, those 6 people that I just named you, they have spent their entire careers as lawyers, 30, 40, 50 years as lawyers, gutting or trying to gut the Civil Rights Act, trying to gut the Voting Rights Act. These folks, they play the long game. It's not a sprint for them.
Nope.
It's a marathon.
That's what
They just keep doing what they're doing until they get in the position to pounce. And now they're in that position. Thanks to Donald Trump, because he's the one who put 3 of these justices on the court. So they're all in agreement about taking their country back by gutting these protections that we have in the law. All right, now, with all of that said, what can we do? What can we do to save and protect the Civil Rights Act of 1964? There are 7 things that I recommend. Number 1, unite. We must come together. We got to stop being divided over trivial, petty stuff. We got to stop being divided, black man against black woman, rich black against poor black, light-skinned black, dark-skinned black, even conservative black versus liberal black or progressive black. I mean, it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. If you're black, that's overarching.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop it right there. Okay, whatever. But damn, an hour and 42. That's the longest I've ever done. But in any case, yeah, that's gonna be it for this. I hope. Again, the plot to re-exclude blacks from white society. We told you. We told you. For those of you that always want us, oh, y'all just conspiracy theories. Y'all about gloom and doom. Well, here you have it. And there's worse yet to come. Hey, so with that, I'm not going to carry it on any longer. Again, that's what we're here for. Hope whoever views this is edified, of course. And hey, spread it around. We're at this point, and the enemies aren't hiding anymore. You know, they're out there. So with that, until the next video, hey, Shalom, and again, prayer is so important here, especially now. Shalom.